Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Joseph Reed Show. You might be watching this on Facebook or YouTube. You may be listening to this on Singing News Radio, maybe watching it on Singing News TV. Thank you so much for being with us today. As you can see by the backdrop behind me, I'm at the 40 Days of Christian Music at the Ark Encounter in Williamstown, Kentucky. It kicked off a few days ago. It's already going incredible. I'm here doing some MC work and working with Singing News TV to bring some of the content to all of our Singing News TV subscribers. You can get all the details on how you can watch tens of thousands of hours of Southern gospel music on demand. It's like the Netflix and Hulu of Southern gospel. SingingNewsTV.com. Watch on your phone, your tablet, your computer, or your smart TV. So check that out. I'm so excited about the guest today that I have with me. He's become a friend of mine over the past few years, an incredible writer. And, this is Dave Clark, everybody. And Dave, I'm just going to do a brief rundown, a little bit about your history. Dave is a songwriter and, according to your website, storyteller, which I agree with that. A great storyteller, great communicator. But is it
Thank you.
is it right you have 30 number one songs, Dave?
We've been very blessed for the years.
Thirty.
That number, can mean different things to different people. I'm the part of it that I'm I don't even know how to say it. I love that it stretched over 5 decades because that was the prayers that Lord would use what He called me to for a long time. And at my age, everything I've done is a long time.
And the
Thank you for
first,
having me on.
well, I'm thrilled to have you with me. The first number one was from Larnelle Harris back in 1987. Here we are 5 decades later. One of your recent number one songs, Karen Peck and New River, the song Sheaves. And right now you've got one that you co-wrote with Karen and I believe Jeff Bumgardner. That's What Faith Looks Like. Did I get the writers right?
Karen and Wayne Hahn.
Wayne Hahn. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeff's
Um,
a dear friend. I'd love to write with him, but this one was with Wayne.
okay. Now, Wayne, now I'm going to tell you a story about this. The last time you and I had lunch, Dave, Karen was recording this song in the studio.
That's right.
Remember?
I forgot about that.
And I went after we had lunch. I drove over to Daywind, and Wayne and Karen took me in the control room and played me the raw cut of the song, and I was I was tore all to pieces. Of course, if you listen to Singing News Radio or Southern Gospel Radio, the song is "That's What Faith Looks Like." What a powerful song. And
Thank you.
Dave, just such, I can't even describe to you how big of a fan I am of yours because I heard your
Wow.
music from Phillips, Craig, and Dean. I was looking at credits in the 80s and in the 90s
Wow. Well,
for
thank you
him.
so much.
Great artists like that. You've had number ones with Sandy Patti, many Southern gospel hits. Do you ever just sit back and think, wow, how have I been able to do this over 5 decades?
You know what? I appreciate all the kind words, but you don't really stop and say, how have I been able to do it? Because I've always been surrounded by great co-writers, great artists. And the bottom line is you can't outrun a call.
Hmm.
And I came down here from Michigan to Nashville when I was 17 by myself. And back then, we didn't, what my plan B was to get better at my plan A, which was to write songs. But you didn't think about doing that for a living. You
Mhm.
just knew that's what God called you to do. And I spent 5 years, as you probably know, with the Spear family,
Mhm.
playing guitar for them. And I remember going to Brock Spear and just saying, I feel like I need to resign, and I love them dearly. They're still like family. But the Brock said, "Well, how are you going to pay your bills?" And I didn't know. I just knew I was supposed to write, and back then I wasn't worried about. I didn't care what you call it. You call it Southern, you call it Karen Peck would do now what For Him would have done then. I'm still
That's
writing
right.
the same songs,
That's right.
so I've
That's
been
right.
very, very blessed.
I think that's a very good point because I mention this all the time. The umbrella of Southern gospel music has got bigger and bigger over the
Right.
past few decades. You've got artists like Jason Crabb or Joseph Habedank, and then you've got Jeff Tolbert and Primitive Road,
Right.
McCamey Legacy, the
Yeah.
more mountain gospel. Then you've got the traditional quartet sound of like Mark Trammell Quartet or somebody like that. It's such a, and I think that's awesome to have this
Yes.
big umbrella that we're all under, and it's not cookie cutter. And I love
Right.
that. And we're able
Yeah.
to reach a bigger audience, Dave, that way because there's so
Right.
many age groups can relate. Here at the Ark, Brian Free and Assurance was singing last night as we record this, and there was a group of girls with their parents, and it looked like a group there, and they probably were high school age girls. And I talked with them briefly, and they said we don't even know what this is. They'd never heard it before.
That's
So
awesome.
they came in to the answer center, and I was on camera one up there on the camera riser, and I look over to my left and I see them sitting over there. And Dave, they I saw those girls getting their phone, and I could see out of my peripheral they were finding the lyrics on the phone,
Wow.
and they were standing up while Brian Free and Assurance were singing Say Amen.
Yeah.
And they were all like four or five of those high school age girls gathered around
Yeah.
that phone, just bopping to it and singing it, reading the lyrics.
Yeah.
Immediately became a fan. I've not shared that with Brian yet. I meant to call him last night and tell him, but it's just so relatable to all generations.
Sure. And Brian, I love Brian Freight Assurance, and they've been very, very kind to us through the years, but that's one of the hardest records to get a song on because Brian is such a student of
Yes.
songwriting.
Yes.
And I remember being at a songwriters conference and Kenna sang Say Amen.
Mm.
Nobody had cut it yet. And I sat in the back and I texted her afterwards. I said, just what those girls did. I said, send me that lyric. I just want to look at it. It was
Yeah.
that good.
Yeah.
So I love Brian. And we had, I think the title cut of their last record was Grateful for the Gospel.
Yes.
And Brian was one in the early days. Some of the Southern groups were a little hesitant to
Mhm.
use my material because they didn't know the Southern Gospel past, but they
Right.
knew the For Him and Phillips, Craig and Dean, and Brian Free was from day one. He was on board. He wanted songs.
Mm. I love that. I love that. Now, 17 years old, you just kind of picked up and moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and decided you wanted to write songs. What kind of sacrifice was that for you to do that?
It sounds bigger than it was because I didn't have much to risk.
Mhm.
And a little bit of my story physically, and I was very sick during those years. I didn't know that there was a long-term story. So the risk of what $200 that I had saved up, that's not a whole lot. And and I just knew if I stayed in my little hometown in Michigan, I would probably end up at the factory where my dad worked. And there was nothing to be embarrassed about that at all. But that wasn't what God called me to do. But you couldn't have connected those dots and said, how do you get from a kid in Jackson, Michigan, to getting to write full time for 45 years? You can't make it happen unless God says, you do what I've called you to do, and I'll do the rest. And that's what He's done.
And as you begin that journey at 17, how long was it before you got a major label cut?
Actually, that happened way quicker than I would have thought. My first cut came within the first year, and it was on a little startup group named the Cathedral Quartet. That's not a bad way to start.
A little
And
little group
yeah,
learning their
it,
way around back then. Yeah.
it was a record called Sunshine and Roses and produced by Vic Clay. And I had a song called Closer to You. And back then, you didn't have co-writers.
Didn't
And
even know
that
you
was,
wrote that. I have that record, and
are
I
you
didn't even,
serious?
yes, sir, I have the record. And I didn't even know that you wrote that until you just said it.
But it was 9 years before I got another cut. Now, that's the part of the story that if you're not sure God called you to do what you do, you walk away during that 9 years and you get on with your life. But
Mm.
that really was never an option for me.
Isn't it ironic that you had a cut on an album called Sunshine and Roses, and then 9 years later you realize it isn't all sunshine and roses trying to be a
Yes.
writer?
Yeah. Yes.
Mm. Did you ever
And yet
feel like giving up in those 9 years?
you don't feel like giving up, but there are times just to pay the bills. If I would have had a plan B, or if I could do something else,
Hmm.
I probably would have, to support my family or something. But again, I was always around it. But there were no classes, there were nobody teaching songwriting,
Mm.
and so I became a student of the craft. And to this day, one of my favorite things to do is to go and speak at writers' conferences, and not say I've got it figured out, because I don't,
Mm.
but to say, here's what I wish someone would have told me in those early years.
Mm. Any writers that you met early on that were a big influence on you?
Bill Gaither obviously is. I have a picture on my phone of the first time I met Bill Gaither, and it was so intimidated because he had written songs that had changed the landscape
Oh,
even
yeah.
back then.
Yeah.
And the story is, Bill says he laughs about it. He doesn't like to tell it because it makes him look bigger than he is, in his words. But Ben Spear took the picture, and in Ben's words, when Bill asked where I was from, evidently I said Jackson, Michigan, really high. So later Ben said, you played for the president, you've met all, you were never that nervous even meeting the president
Right.
as you were when you met Bill Gaither. And my response evidently was, if the president had written Because He Lives, I'd have been nervous around him.
That's great.
It's
You,
true.
Bill Gaither is such an icon. Gloria as well. Great writers, composers. The guy is he 88 or something?
Yes, 88.
88 years young. They just released two new, or they released one, maybe the second one has been released. Gaither videos that were recorded first of the year or last year. He's still going. But
Yeah,
you were there in the thick of it in the early 90s whenever the Gaither homecoming really took off. It
sure.
was like an organic, it really wasn't meant to do what it done when they done that homecoming record, but it just blew up. And I think that we're still feeling the benefits to this day in this genre. Well, we have to be of that incredible impact that the Gaither Homecoming series has made on not just gospel music, but it
Right.
really highlighted Southern gospel music most of the time.
Yes. And I still don't know Bill all that well. I'm still nervous around him. But I think the genius of that, and the genius of Bill, is an awareness of what moved him.
Mhm.
And yes, he's a great writer, but that very first thing where they were just kind of gathered around the piano, he felt something he trusted. And if it moved him, he had the smarts to say, I think it's going to move other people. And and to this day, I don't think there's a real tight schedule they're on. I think Bill
Mhm.
still trusts that inner instinctive quality that has served him well all through these years.
I think that the Gaithers have they're not braggers. They don't go around and say, "Look at what I've done," and look at this impact I've made. I've never heard Bill say that. He's not a friend of mine. We have met on several occasions. He's been very kind. About a year ago, I was able to sit down with him for a few minutes
Wow.
and talk with him, which was
Uh,
wonderful. It was he couldn't have been kinder. But I traveled a few years on the road with Carmen as his publicist and product manager and helped with volunteer coordination, which was an honor. I mean, Carmen was larger than life in the 80s. But Carmen would tell me stories on the bus of Bill Gaither really put him on the map
right.
because the Bill Gaither trio took Carmen out with them, and he
Right.
opened shows for them, basically with a guitar.
Right.
And that's what got Carmen known. And Carmen was so grateful and spoke so highly of Bill. And fun fact here, do you remember the Bill Gaither's homecoming board game?
No.
There was a board game.
That's
It, it
awesome.
it's a trivia quiz game that actually Kevin Spencer of the Spencers, it was his
Yeah.
brainchild, and they sold. I'm sure they didn't sell millions of them, but they sold a lot of them. And
That's
on the
great.
Carmen bus, and this was from the 90s, like the late 90s, I think. Carmen on the bus had that game, and anytime we had,
That's great.
we would be up till 3 o'clock in the morning playing Bill Gaither, the trivia game, and Carmen won every time.
I need to track one of those down. My daughters are huge fans as well. I'll tell you a great Gaither story if you got a second.
Please.
Uh, so when Bill got his start, his first publisher was Ben Spear,
Mm.
and Ben was my first publisher.
Oh.
And so there were some parallels. And we just had a book come out a couple of weeks ago. And so I interviewed several people in the writing of that book, and one of them was Bill.
Hmm.
And I got to tell him the story that he had not heard. But I was always intrigued because I was traveling with the Spears. I would say to Ben, "So what was it like?" And I would ask those fan kind of questions. And one of the questions I said was, "When did you know that something special with Bill? When did you feel like that? Was there a moment when it turned the corner?"
Mm.
And Ben didn't hesitate. He said, every Monday morning, Bill would call me and he'd say, what song worked for you? What if you took this record and you put it on this part of the table? See if it sells. Maybe if you change your order and try this song first." And Bill was always that. None of that surprises you,
No.
because that still is what I said. It's an awareness, and he
No.
wants to know. Ben said one Monday morning, the conversation said, I don't think Bill even realized he did it, but he quit talking about how many records he sold that weekend. He began to talk about how many boxes of records he sold. And Ben
Wow.
said it was subtle, but he knew the dynamic had changed. Now, think about that.
Yeah. That's almost like retraining, maybe even subliminally retraining your mind to think bigger and
Yes.
have a bigger picture.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
So I'm as a student of communication and songs and business, and because I'm an introvert, I'm not very high visibility. I want I want to watch the room. I'm
Mhm.
trying to learn from everybody, and those kind of stories that's a big deal to me to have that kind of an inside story.
I think what people really can grasp a hold of, and to a lot of people in this industry, I'm still wet behind the ears, even though I'm 51, but it's really all I've done. My first job ever was in Southern Gospel Radio when I was 13. So
Wow.
in 1987, you could get an FCC license at 13 years old. And my dad was a morning show guy, and he had a radio broadcast, a preacher radio broadcast on a station in Bristol, Tennessee. And the owner liked my dad's voice, and they became friends. And he said, Cecil, I know you're an evangelist, you do mission work, but I need a morning show guy. I'll work with your schedule. If you got to be out of town or out of the country, we'll work with you, but I'd love to have you. And so dad started working there. And in the summer, when I was 12 years old, when all we were out of school and all the kids were out in the neighborhood playing, I was getting up at 5:15 a.m. to go in to sign on at WBCV in Bristol, Tennessee with my dad, and I would sit in the production
Good
room and
night.
just listen to records and records and records. And that's when I learned about Southern gospel music, was right there, and
Wow.
the impact that it has had on my life. But even at 51, I feel like I still have so much to learn. And
Sure.
I know you and I have, and I don't mean this with any ego, because I know you have no ego. I don't feel like I do, but we have a lot we can teach people.
Absolutely.
But we have so much that we can still learn. It's always
Yes,
vital to be a student and not think that we've got something
absolutely.
figured out.
And to be honest, the model has changed since we
Yes.
woke up this morning.
It has.
And one of the things that still I feel it keeps me in the hunt is I'm still the student. If it changed yesterday, I want to know what it was, and that not only the impact on me, but the older you get, you also get asked for advice a lot more.
You
And
do.
if I'm going to give advice, it's up to me to at least know what I'm talking about as much as I can.
Yes. At the heart of everything we do, really, even though we enjoy what we do, I've seen you do your storytelling shows where you sing some of the songs you've written, you tell stories. It's one of my favorite things in the world. Honestly, if I could buy a ticket to see you do that every night of the week, I would do it because it is some of my favorite stuff. And
That's
at the
crazy.
it's true, and I mean it. At the core of all that, we are wanting to be encouragers to people and to draw people to Christ. That's why we do what we do.
Yes,
At the very core of it, there's an entertainment aspect. I talked to Pat Barker on this very show the other day about that. There's an entertainment aspect. And when I think back to Carmen, I brought him up earlier, but the first night I went out on the road with him, I hadn't seen him yet. The bus, he was on the bus all the time. He wanted to sleep in a bunk just like us. He wouldn't let us convert the rear lounge to his own. He just loved being one of the guys. But at this particular date, he had flown in, I believe it was Dallas, Texas, and the bus met him there because he flew in there. Then we picked him up, but I hadn't seen him yet. So he gets up and does his show and comes down off the stage, goes around back. He comes by the merch where I'm up there with the volunteers. He stops. He says hi to me. He says, "Man, I'm looking forward to working with you. We'll talk on the bus." So he goes up on the bus. Now this is what rocked my world. And anyone who would ask me, "Hey, what was Carmen like?" or "Was Carmen really authentic?" This is the best story I could ever tell. We walked into the bus. We had a meeting virtually after every show we done. We would go into the back. We would go over numbers and the crowd and things like that. Here was the process. He would have an invitation, and whenever people came to the Lord, he would get them to walk up front. And then we had a crew organized to give them a bracelet. On that bracelet was a website where Carmen had videos on that website for new converts that just came to Christ, walking them through what to do next. And so we would count how many of those bracelets we had handed out. So we would keep track of it. That was part of what we
good
done.
night.
So when I went to the back, Carmen didn't ask me how much merch sales we done. Most of the concerts we done were free. We had some sponsorship, so most of them didn't even come with an honorarium because
Right.
Carmen was totally against selling tickets for his show. He wanted everyone to come for free, which I admire that. The first question he asked me, and I walked in there and said, "Carmen, I want you to know I'm such a fan." He wouldn't have remembered that I had sang on stage with him as part of background vocals during the Riot tour when I believe it was Zoe Girl was his background vocalist, and they signed. And so I got a
Right.
call one day, and they were like, "Carmen needs background singers." And so I was part of that, which was cool. He wouldn't have remembered that, but I told him about that. And he said, I'm looking forward to, I'm looking forward to you working with us. I've heard a lot good about you." So, how many people got saved tonight? The first question the man ever asked.
Good night. Love that.
First question he ever asked me. He didn't even ask anything about me or the event. He said, "How many people got saved?" And that was what he asked from that day forward after every show. That's what he cared about most. He
That's
was an
great.
entertainer, a
Yes.
great communicator, put on a great show, but at his core, it was all about the
But
gospel, bringing people to Christ.
but if you had asked him what do you call what you do stylistically? You couldn't have put that in a box. You couldn't have put a name on it.
You
It was
can't.
just about, here's what God called me to do. God did something great in his life. You wouldn't remember this, I wouldn't think, but Carmen worked on as a GMA showcase at
Hmm.
TPAC in Nashville with the
Oh,
Spear
wow.
family back in the 80s or
I
back.
didn't know that.
And I was just, like I said, the shy guitar player. He came and stood and talked to me and just told me, and I asked him questions about his vision for ministry.
Hmm.
And it was, I never met him again, never had a reason to run into him. But, just those kind of people that they were willing to speak into a young kid's life who,
Hmm.
he would have never known what my dream was or what my call was.
Yeah.
He was my friend that night.
Yeah. He was great. He was great. He's very dearly missed. I didn't mean to go
Yeah.
down that road and bring,
No,
but
I
really
love it.
to bring it around, it's just at the core of what we do is ministry first, and the rest of it
Uh,
is just calling. We're called to do certain things. We walk into that. Now, what kind of music did you listen to growing up?
There was my dad was a church bass singer.
Oh,
He was the bass singer in the church choir, and bass singers back then they get to the note and they hold it a little longer than everybody else. And I always laughed because I thought they just wanted to make sure everybody knew they got to the note. And so I grew up just hardcore Southern gospel fan. They would take us to back in the all night sings up in Michigan, over in Detroit, and a guy named Lloyd Orrell would book concerts. And that, I don't know, we didn't have any money. I don't know how my parents got us there, but I can remember standing in line to buy sheet music from those, and I've still got those that I paid $1 a copy for. And even back then, I knew I didn't know how. I just knew God called me to write. So that was Spears were my favorite group.
Mm.
Last year, Mark Spear had heard me tell that story about the dollar movie, and that's Brock and Faye's oldest son. He
Mhm.
sent me the actual sign that hung in their booth that says all sheet music $1, and it hangs on my wall downstairs at home.
That's
Treasure.
that is awesome. How
Yeah.
cool is that? The spear. I have a great spear story, by the way. I was 15. I showed up at Viking Hall for the Campbell Gospel Show, which was a monthly concert that a car dealership owner put on there. They would video it and televise it on a local show. I don't know if you remember Huff Cook Gospel Sing up in East
Sure.
Tennessee.
East
Okay.
Tennessee.
Yeah. This kind of was the show that took its place. And the Spears were, I would get there early, and I would just watch the buses pull in and the people load in and out. And then I was there that night, and the groups would use the video to eventually get and sell on their table. It was kind of part of the deal. And the Spears were there that night, and I was just sitting on the front row, 7,000 seats in the auditorium, no one there but me. I'm sitting on the
Wow.
front. Ben Spear walks up to me and says, "Hey, buddy," he said, "do you want to make $20?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I want to make $20." So he said, "Follow me." And he took me back, and I helped somebody run some cables and do a few things. It wasn't
Sure.
even what I'd done wasn't worth $20. And I didn't realize it then, but he'd done that not needing my help. I never realized this 2 years later. He saw me, a young kid, a fan, sitting there in an auditorium with nobody, just
Early.
gawking,
Yeah. Yes.
and wanted to make me feel important. And I didn't realize this till I was an adult, and it hit me. And I got, I wouldn't have even cared if there was $20
Yeah.
given to me.
Sure.
At that point, I was just backstage, and I was seeing these
Yeah.
people that I were my heroes. And then, sure
Yes.
enough, he walks up to me, hands me $20. Now, many years down the road, as a matter of fact, a year before Ben passed, I was able to, well, right before he got really bad with his dementia, I was able to tell him that story. And I was almost in tears, as you would imagine. It was very emotional.
Sure.
And in Ben Spear fashion, and we were never close friends, but he looked at me and I said, "I just want to thank you for that. That meant the world to me." And he said, Well, young man, I probably stole that 20 off of Brock anyway, which was
That's
amazing.
that's Ben. Yeah,
And I just have never
yeah.
forgot that. And
He
we're
was a
kind of,
consummate teacher
oh
as well.
man, I hear so many good stories, and he was such a wonderful person,
Yeah.
and I'm very close with Allison and Brian Spear. And we're running out of time, Dave, but I want to remind everybody, go to daveclarkwrites.com. That's Dave's website, Dave Clark Writes. If you're
Well, thank you.
interested in becoming a student of songwriting, then Dave has a lot of courses on there. His bio is on there, a lot of great information about that. Dave, before we go, is there, if you could sing one song, knowing it was your last song to sing that you wrote, what would that be?
You mentioned Brian Free earlier. There's a song that I wrote with Lee Black that they recorded that defines me more than any. It was never a single. You may not have even ever heard it, but it's my life story. And it just says, I'll leave with nothing left.
Mm,
And
mm,
God has been so good to let me do what he called me to do.
mm,
And we've enjoyed all the commercial side of it. And at the end of the day, whatever there's left that I can do, I'm going to leave here with nothing left. I'm going to leave it all on the field.
mm,
And you, you know, the way we met was I just reached out and said, "Hey, love what you're doing. Don't know you. Can we have lunch?"
yeah.
And I'm that guy. I want to know the people that are telling the stories because it's people like you who are the caretakers of what we do.
Mm,
So I'm grateful for the friendship. Thank you for the time today, and
man.
we're going to get you on our podcast next. You
Well,
know that,
tell
right?
us about that, by the way, your podcast that you do with Dusty Wells from Daywind Records.
It's called "I Love to Tell the Story." And it was born out of walking through the SGMA Hall of Fame over in Sevierville. And I started explaining to my daughter all the plaques on the wall. And I said, I knew this guy personally, I knew his kids. And I realized it's our generation
Mm,
that knows where the beginning was. And
yeah.
we've got a responsibility to tell the story. So,
Mm,
Dusty and I sit down. In fact, you mentioned Allison Spear. The current episode is an interview with Allison that is unbelievable. Last week was Scotty Inman. Next week is Jim and Melissa Brady. And it's different than most interviews. We are loving telling the story, listening to the story, and we're going to get Joseph Reed scheduled.
oh, I can't wait. I love to tell the stories of the podcast. You can listen wherever you stream or download your favorite podcast. DaveClarkWrites.com. Dave, you've grown to be one of my favorite people. I admire you and
Well,
respect you so much. And thank you so much for spending time with me. It means the world to me. I appreciate it.
thank you, Joseph. I feel the same way. Thank you.